Legally Speaking with me, Tarun Nangia. Today we are going to decode the judgment, and the judgment is the Electoral Bond Scheme judgment, which, as we all know, a five-judge bench of the Supreme Court of India has held as unconstitutional. Now, who was this bench? There was the Chief Justice of India, Dhananjay Yashwant Chandrachud. Then there was Justice Sanjeev Khanna, Justice Bhushan Gavai, Justice J.B. Pardiwala, and Justice Manoj Misra. And of course, we have an eminent guest who will decode this judgment for you. Dr. Abhishek Manu Singhvi is a third time, or should I rephrase myself, soon to be fourth time sitting member of parliament. He's served as the Additional Solicitor General of India, eminent senior advocate at the Supreme Court, one of India's top commercial lawyers. Also has served on many eminent parliamentary committees, including chairing the Committee on Home Affairs. Good to see you, and thank you for making time amidst your busy schedule today evening. And without wasting much time, let's get to you. Your comments on today's judgment and decode it for us.
Well, I'll not pretend to decode such a detailed judgment in a short while, but I'll attempt to give you a fair idea of the broad issues and the decision. But let me start by saying, Tarun, that saying too little, too late in English certainly doesn't apply, thankfully doesn't apply to this judgment, which is very welcome. It is not too little, it is adequate, it's cautious, and is very, very welcome. But it is a part of too little, not the too, it is a part of the too late, not the too little. Because the interim order, this was passed in 2019. And let me here very squarely and candidly fault the 2019 bench, which did not think it fit to take it up then, take it up nearly then, shortly then, and deal with it. The result is, Tarun, that you have had the advantage, if you are the creator of this illegal scheme, of enjoying its fruits for 4 long years. And that includes the year of elections then and a year of elections coming up now. So literally a 5-year span, you virtually touched between these two. That was a highly avoidable delay, which then, and I had nothing to do with the current bench, should have seen, was writ large on the wall, and should have avoided. And I don't think it speaks well of the Supreme Court at all not to have addressed that issue in 19 or latest 20. My second point is that the reason I say about this delay is also because I have no doubt that those who conceived it, those who designed it, did it with ulterior motives. The idea was to design an opaque scheme and to legitimize donations with the grand slogan of, oh, we are doing away with cash. Actually, it was an over-clever attempt. It was reared with duplicity and born in deceit. I'll tell you why. You design a scheme where government of the day and non-government political parties of the day receive donations through bonds. First, obvious commonsensical question to anybody is that if you are a donor, a man in the street, rich, poor, or medium, are you going to give more or more easily to political parties not in power? It is common sense. It will be slanted much, much more, which is legitimate. I can afford to give you 5 times more than I give me because I am a poor fellow on the street. You are a person in power. Knowing that, you design a scheme where I can't find out whether the donor, first of all, I can't find out at all what the donor is, Tarun Nangia. You can do it through trusts and all that stuff. But even if I do find out, I don't find out the details of the donation at all. The answer is a ridiculous, even more ridiculous one. Oh, you can find out. You don't need to find out. You have no right to know. But the government knows. So-and-so ministry knows, so-and-so bank knows. SBI is one of the banks mentioned. Isn't it ridiculous? Because the whole point of the matter is that when the bulk of the donations are going to the government alone knowing, is that a sufficient safeguard? So that's the heart of transparency. Thirdly, you have not published figures, Tarun, which show that the totality of the donations to the ruling BJP currently is probably more than many, many times, I don't know the exact figure now, all the parties, regional or national put together, many times over. So what you have done is you've enjoyed this bonanza with no disclosure and no transparency. And there is a very remarkable argument by the government of India in the written submissions. They say the citizen has no right to know, which of course the Supreme Court has blown to smithereens. They have really demolished that. So and there is one other point which people have forgotten. This is the main issue, transparency, and that's why the court said it violates 19 There was a very interesting second issue which people have not noticed. Knowing that when we make the scheme, we'll come up against a wall, that there is a provision of the Companies Act which limits the amount of donation Tarun Nangia can give to Abhishek Singhvi. So before that, or simultaneous with this scheme which they designed, they deleted that. Means you can give unlimited. Theoretically, you can give $1 billion to a political party. I mean, theoretically, nobody does that. And there is no limit. So that second issue is also framed by the court, that whether, and they hold that the deletion of a limit to corporate donations is arbitrary. There has to be a limit. Now, these two combined to produce the third very, very major point. You asked for decoding, I'm just finishing in half a minute. And the third major point is it makes a slanted, non-level playing field, which hits the basic structure directly. If I have a system where he has 50 units of donations and Nangia has 1, or 100 versus 1, then it's an obviously non-level playing field. Now, what is this non-level playing field about? It is about free and fair elections. Free and fair elections have been held to be part of the basic structure because that's part of democracy itself. You are living in an ivory tower, or you are trying to sermonize if you say that, look, elections are not only won by money, by other factors also. Of course, there are other factors, but an overwhelming factor is played by money, and with enormous, obscene amounts of money. What people tell me now about the cost of a Lok Sabha election, especially in some states like, Telangana or Karnataka or Andhra, etc., compared to the Lok Sabha elections of the 50s, 60s or 70s, is unimaginable. Even today, by any standards in any country, it's unimaginable. Assembly seats today cost more in electoral power than parliamentary seats cost till 2 decades ago. So this is all because you're having obscene amounts of money, and this is the party giving you now money through the electoral bond fraud. Anyway, these people have enjoyed it while the going was good. Now the chickens have come home to roost, and I'm very happy that the last para gives directions which are very clear. A, stop forthwith. B, disclose everything from that 2019. I wish it had happened earlier. I wish we hadn't faced 2 elections or 2 electoral cycles. The second one is almost upon us with this whole thing going on.
One supplementary question that I have to ask you is that now we revert to the old system where donations will be made to people or we revert to the cash system, or what will happen now?
No, you see, this is an argument raised. It was a scare argument. It was a consequences argument, a fear argument, which is actually hollow. You see, the fact that you strike down something and you revert to the old system is no justification to support that what you were doing was unconstitutional. You had a system before. Now you can't say, I did away with a system which had deficiency. Let me admit there were deficiencies prior to 2019. You can't say I did away with the deficiencies by making an unconstitutional scheme. You see, today you made an over-clever scheme. Nobody says there should be cash donations. That will be dealt with, and there's a para in the Supreme Court order which says the justification of black money is not valid. They've demolished their argument. You have to deal with black money by 10 arguments. Except not demonetization, by the way. No demonetization. But black money, you reduce in the economy, then automatically funding will become less. But the answer is not that you replace the black money menace without addressing on the finance side by electoral bond scheme.
One final question I want to ask you. Earlier, corporates used to have electoral trusts which were used to donate to political parties, like companies like the Tatas and the Godrej and these big corporates. Do you think under the new system, it will be just plainly writing checks to political parties in an open and transparent manner like it happens abroad, say in America or UK, where there are fundraisers held and people write checks?
No, that will always continue. It is always available now if you want to do it. Also, I don't think electoral trusts in any way are inhibited by this judgment or by the law. You can still donate through electoral trusts. The only difference is, that electoral trust A donates to Nangia The members of the Electoral Trust are revealed. That's all there is to it. What is so great about it? Nothing.
So the masking has been stopped. There is everything has been done.
The whole thing about two issues. One, masking, as you call it, transparency or lack of it, opacity, hiding, concealing, deceit. The second is unlimited funding. No limits. The Companies Act for decades has limits. You suddenly did away because you knew when you created the scheme that if you don't do away with that limit, the electoral bond will be a non-starter because people will be, shortly limited. So they did a double whammy.
So as you have often said, sunlight is the best disinfectant. Do you think this judgment has, in a sense, played the role of a sun and light has been now emitted?
This judgment has done absolutely the role of a disinfectant and more. It has quashed, it has incinerated. It is definitely light, much more, no heat, unlike the sun, but real, genuine light. But more importantly, it has set right the record to create a genuine system without opacity. The whole judgment's heart of the matter is transparency. It is not on the merits. It is not saying that you cannot donate 10 to Nangia and 1 to Singhvi. It is not saying that, you can't make your own choice. It is not saying that people should donate equally. But it is making a very strong point about transparency in donations. And let me tell you one more thing, lastly. The moment you bring in transparency, half of these ills end. People don't want to be seen. If I am donating, I don't want to be seen that I gave 9 rupees out of 10 to Nangia and I gave 1 rupee to poor Mr. So-and-so. You do it much more if there is opacity. Secondly, the recipient also realizes if I take 9 rupees out of 10 and any project in my state or anything is linked to that, it is clear quid pro quo. So the whole account, transparency is not an end in itself. It's a very important means to an end. The end is accountability. Accountability follows.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time and the quick explanation that you gave of the electoral bonds judgment. Much appreciated. Thank you so much for joining in.
Since the judgment is of a constitution bench running into hundreds of pages, it requires a comprehensive study and thereafter a structured reply. तो ये आपसे हम बहुत विनम्रता से कहना चाहेंगे कि जो कि सुप्रीम कोर्ट के संवैधानिक पीठ का ये फैसला है, अतः पार्टी की ओर से और संभवतः सरकार की ओर से आवश्यकता पड़ेगी तो इसका सुविचारित टिप्पणी की जाएगी। आज जब मैं पार्टी के राष्ट्रीय मंच पर बैठा हूं तो कुछ बातें हम कहना चाहते हैं। ये निर्णय एक बहुत ही प्रामाणिक उद्देश्य के लिए लाया गया था। This decision was undertaken for a very laudable objective to bring in transparency in electoral funding. चुनाव में पारदर्शिता हो फंडिंग में, इसके लिए लाया गया था। चुनाव में कैश का प्रभाव कम हो, उसके लिए भी लाया गया था। इस बात को समझना बहुत जरूरी है। हमारे जितने चंदा देने वाले लोग हैं, उनकी अपेक्षा थी कि अगर उचित होगा कि हमारे लिए भी गोपनीयता रखी जाए, और ये बहुत अस्वाभाविक नहीं है। मैं आपको एक अपने राजनीतिक अनुभव से बात कहना चाहता हूं। कहीं पर कोई सरकार है तो हम उनको सहयोग करते हैं। अब मान लीजिए वो सरकार हार गई और उनके विरोधी दूसरी जगह आए तो वो उनके खिलाफ हो जाते हैं। इसलिए कोई ईमानदारी से बिजनेस कर रहे हैं तो उनको अपना काम करें, ऐसा विचार था। और जो लेवल प्लेइंग फील्ड की बात करते हैं, उनके बारे में मुझे एक ही बात कहनी है। जहां तक कांग्रेस की टिप्पणी मैंने सुना नहीं है, अगर उन्होंने कहा है कि घूस लेके दिया गया है, अगर ये कहा है तो जिनका पूरा संस्कार घूस पर है, वो अगर ये आरोप लगाते हैं तो बड़ा हास्यास्पद लगता है। Those whose DNA is based upon corruption and bribery, please don't make those allegations against the BJP. लेकिन जो लेवल प्लेइंग फील्ड की बात करते हैं, उसके बारे में मुझे एक ही बात कहनी है। फील्ड लेवल का है या लेवल का नहीं है, ये तो उन्हीं के बारे में तय होगा ना जो फील्ड के अंदर हैं। जो फील्ड के बाहर हैं, वो लेवल में है या नहीं है, कैसे तय होगा? आप फील्ड में है या नहीं कौन तय करता है? जनता तय करती है। तो अगर देश की जनता ने बहुतों को फील्ड से बाहर कर दिया है, वो लेवल प्लेइंग फील्ड की बात करते हैं, तो और हम क्या बताएं? आप समझते हैं मेरा इशारा किसकी ओर है? बहुत से लोग को चुनाव में एक सीट भी नहीं मिलती है, अपने पुराने बड़े बड़े प्रभाव के क्षेत्रों में, इसलिए वो बात अलग है, छोड़ दीजिए। लेकिन हाँ, चुनाव में सुधार के लिए ये हमारी मोदी जी की सरकार का एक प्रयास नहीं था। आपको याद होगा, वोटर लिस्ट पर आपकी फोटो छपती है, ये भी उस समय हुआ था ना। आज बड़ी संख्या में जो ईवीएम्स लाए गए, उससे बूथ कैप्चरिंग बंद हुई है ना। जिस प्रदेश से मैं आता हूं, वहां तो जब तक 10-15 लाख नहीं गिरती थी तो चुनाव होता ही नहीं था। और वो अतीत की बात है ना। और भी कई तरीके से चुनाव में सुधार के लिए जितना प्रयास करना है वो काफी किया गया है। ये भी उसी प्रामाणिक प्रयास में चुनाव को पारदर्शी बनाने का प्रयास था। अब माननीय सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने एक फैसला किया है, तो हम उनका सम्मान करते हैं। इस फैसले पर क्या बोलना है, जैसे मैंने कहा, निर्णय को पढ़ने के बाद हम बताएंगे।
After Dr. Abhishek Manu Singhvi, now we are joined by another eminent lawyer, senior advocate Sanjay Jain joins us. As you all know, he has served as the Additional Solicitor General of India for a long time of 9 years. Good to see you. And thank you for your time. And I may would like to tell the viewers that you are joining us from the Himalayas, where you were out there for a short trip. So for this judgment, you've made time. I really appreciate that. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.
So at the outset on the electoral bonds judgment, the 5-judge bench that was read out yesterday, I need your analysis and your observations.
See, in my view, this judgment basically addresses the larger issues, and the larger issues are the right to information of a citizen vis-a-vis right to privacy of the donors to the political parties. And that is one. And the second is the aspect of free and fair elections, which in my view has guided the soul of the judgment, particularly of Honorable the Chief Justice, because the principles of free and fair election have been viewed from the lens of there being no limit prescribed for the political funding. That aspect has been viewed from the perspective that if there is no limit for political funding, then a particular corporate entity may succeed in influencing the policy decisions of the government. And that is something which is totally or fundamentally opposed to the concept of free and fair elections. Because if it is possible for somebody or some business entity or a corporate entity or a particular group as a whole to be able to dictate the policy decisions, to the extent they are pro-citizens, it is all right. It is not at all being suggested in the judgment that every policy decision which is pro-industry is automatically anti-citizen. That is not the ethos. The point is that there is a possibility that it may so happen. So therefore, that possibility has to be ruled out or eradicated or minimized. That is one aspect. The second aspect, which is very important, is that right to information, which is a fundamental right under Article 19. Now, the question is that whether a voter who is supposed to be voting and making an informed choice to vote, whether he ought to know or he ought not to know that a particular corporate entity who is funding a particular political party, what is the extent of that contribution or the funding? And then he can make his understanding that this particular corporate entity, which is already known for its area of business or its interests or its vested interests, if that particular corporate entity is funding to that an extent, then what could be the possible outcome and what kind of policy decisions I am going to get from this government if elected. So that to that extent, that electoral's choice is hypothetically gets affected. But there can of course be an argument that because in Indian body polity, where political parties are largely the lawmakers, in the sense that the lawmakers by and large are coming from the structured political parties, whether it is at the state level or at the union level, there the voter goes by the overall manifesto. So he may not really be affected, or he may not really be concerned, or he may not be able to anticipate whether a particular amount of contribution from a particular corporate entity will necessarily affect a economic decision, and what is that economic decision he doesn't know as yet. So there is a counter argument also that this apprehension is a little overplaced, and it is a hyper reaction. It can be viewed from that perspective also. But then the question is that we have to strike a balance. And for striking the balance, the cap which was removed is something which appears to have bothered the honorable bench. And another aspect is the balance, the delicate balance which was well established in ADR judgment and POCL judgment. That balance was perceived as being disturbed, and that is why this judgment has come. And in fact, Justice Sanjeev Khanna's judgment also, to a large extent, is influenced by this thought process. But there are several questions which this judgment is bound to give rise to, and there will be a huge debate. We are, of course, nearing the election time at parliament level. But there will be a huge debate even after the elections, because this particular judgment does not concern only the parliamentary elections, it concerns the state elections also. And the political funding is happening in a huge manner in the at the state level parties also. And the corporate entities are all over. And it is also to be understood that lot many industries in this country are still heavily cash centric, and this particular system of electoral bond was introduced with the objective of eradicating the cash contribution and bringing the contribution to political parties through banking channels, because the electoral bonds could be purchased only through bank accounts. So in that sense, if we perceive it and if we visualize it, then it was a good system, because every contribution was coming through banking channel. Now the only question is anonymity. Now there will be many corporate entity who will not be comfortable in being disclosed, their identity being disclosed, because they may feel apprehensive that if the adverse regime comes tomorrow, they may be targeted. That is one. Secondly, they may not, for their own reasons, perceptional reasons, optical reasons, may not like to be exposed to the public that they have contributed an X amount to a particular political party in a particular state or at a central level. So that those apprehensions of losing their cover, their confidential cover, and the anonymity is something which is going to make a big change in their decision making. Now they may be reluctant to contribute through banking channels as much as they have been doing till now. Now that doesn't mean, I mean, it is a wishful thinking that this judgment is going to bring a very wide range reforms in the long run. According to me, the impact of this judgment will be felt only in the short term, and in the long term, the stakeholders will find an alternative method, and it might give rise to, or it may give impetus or encouragement to the cash economy being reintroduced in the ecosystem of political funding. But because we have to realize that, as I said, that there are a lot many industries in this country which are still unstructured, which are heavily cash-centric, and the cash generated from those industries can still be used for political funding without there being any accounting to that effect. So that may be taking a retrograde step. So therefore, the ideal situation would be that the broad concerns with this judgment as articulated may be debated and addressed by the lawmakers, and they may come out with a more balanced law, which may strike a healthy balance and a due concern to the sentiments of the honorable bench as regards the right of an individual to know, at the same time, right of privacy of the donors who or the contributors to the political parties, because we have to understand that if the democracy has to survive in this country, then the electoral system also has to sustain itself. And for electoral system to sustain in the regime of political parties, the political parties need money to disseminate information, to circulate their agenda, their manifesto, to reach out to the people, which needs money. So it is not that there is any unholy thing or unholy nexus between the donors and the recipients of these kind of funds, because it is absolutely essential for political parties to have this funding, because this funding ultimately helps them reach out to the people, explain themselves, express their concerns, and also to tell them that this is what they want to do, and this is how the people make choice. So therefore, it is a very delicate system. It is a complex system, but it is a system which is deeply rooted in the body polity and the political system of this country. So therefore, this judgment will have a far-reaching effect, and it is very difficult on the face of it to criticize the judgment, because it achieves, or it at least it seeks to achieve, I would say, constitutional morality, and that should be the concern of any constitutional court, because morality, as I perceive for myself, may not be exactly applicable when it comes to the court of law, because the honorable bench has to see the constitutional morality of a regime which has been brought by these amendments. But as I have pointed out, that the after effects of this judgment will, when tested at the ground level, will have some negative effects also. And those negative effects need to be addressed with a great deal of care, because if those negative effects prevail, then it will be a situation which will be worse than what it was prior to this judgment.
Thank you, and appreciate you joining us, and appreciate that you're on a trip, but you could make time. I can see you join us from the hills, but thank you for sparing time, sharing your opinion on the electoral bond judgment. And it was indeed enlightening to know your views, and looking forward for more. Thank you so much for joining. Now, after you've heard Dr. Abhishek Manu Singhvi, Senior Advocate Sanjay Jain, the former Additional Solicitor General of India, and also you heard comments by Ravi Shankar Prasad's eminent Senior Advocate and the former Law Minister of India. Now we are joined by Advocate Abhimanyu Bhandari, who studied at the Oxford University, practiced abroad, and now is an arguing counsel at the Supreme Court of India. We will know from him what he feels about the electoral bonds judgment and simply his analysis. Good to see you, Abhimanyu. And what is your insight on this judgment?
Thank you, Tarun. Tarun, I think this is one of the most landmark judgments that Supreme Court has given. And I tell you why this judgment is landmark. A lot of the commentators and speakers are praising this judgment because it says that the voter has a right to know and has a right to information as to which corporate is funding which political party and how much that corporate is funding that political party. And I think that the media has kind of highlighted that as a major issue in this judgment, which is, I think, very laudable and very good. But Tarun, a very major aspect of this judgment is the fact that the courts have come down heavily and have said that the amendments which were brought into the Companies Act and to various other acts to enable a company to give political contributions, unlimited political contributions to any political parties or to political parties, and they frowned upon that. I think that's also a very big part of the judgment. And that is something which is very important. Remember, Tarun, that since 1960, if I'm not mistaken, there have been restrictions in our Companies Act that a company cannot give more than 5% of its average net profits in the last 3 years as a political contribution. In the 2013 Act, that was increased to 7.5%. But still, it was a small percentage of the profits that a company could part away with if it wanted to give a political contribution to a party or to any other parties together. But this cap was completely done away with. Now, please remember, Tarun, in any economy, corporates play a huge role in persuading people as to what should be a policy and what should not be a policy. Now, if you allow a big corporate to give huge amounts of political contribution and don't cap it to some amount or to its average profits, then you can literally allow that corporate to influence public policy in our country. And that is something which cannot be allowed. And therefore, the courts have come down heavily. And both the judgments have spent some part dealing with this issue to say, sorry, we can't allow corporates to give unlimited amount of contribution. What was more surprising was that the electoral bond scheme allowed even loss-making companies to contribute. So before, there was a restriction that only profit-making companies could contribute. Even loss-making companies could contribute. Now, this kind of a legislation, this kind of a system where any company can come and contribute unlimited amount, and even if it is loss-making, can give political donations, would raise a lot of questions. And one needs to be careful, because in a capitalist country or in a country where we are in a free market country, we can't allow any particular corporate house or any particular lobbyist to be able to persuade policy making. Now, the court very carefully went through a large number of judgments given by various courts around the world, Australia, USA, everywhere. And it noted that this was a concern which any common law country or any civilized economy has. And that is to ensure that you have to restrict unbridled amount of money which can come in from a corporate to influence policy making. And I think one of the biggest takeaways of this judgment is that it comes down firmly and heavily and says, sorry, you have to cap how much a company can give a political party. And that cap, which was there in Section 182 of the Companies Act before the amendment was made, has been restored back. And I think that's a very, very big and a welcome part of the judgment.
Thank you for that.
My takeaway.
Thank you for your analysis and comment specifically on the Companies Act that you made. It was a pleasure that you could find time and join us. Appreciate it. Thank you.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.